Andy Lee recently recommended Adam Booth for the role of Anthony Joshua's new trainer. Lee, of course, was trained by Adam Booth himself towards the back end of his career, where Booth guided him to the WBO World Middleweight title. I think that was back around 2013, 2014. Booth has also trained the likes of Billy Joe Saunders briefly. He trained Mike Perez briefly. He trained Josh Kelly, of course, Joe Joyce briefly, George Groves for a long time, David Haye for a long time, currently Harlem Eubank, briefly Chris Eubank Jr., Charlie Edwards for a couple years, Shannon Courtney, I believe, although I think he is Shannon Courtney's manager, not her trainer, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael Conlon, who he trains currently, Ryan Burnett, who he trained for a while, and so on. So he's worked with a lot of people over the years. Adam Booth, based upon what I've seen in various interviews, is a guy who's quite picky about who he trains though, because it's not just about whether he thinks he can improve a fighter and whether his style of training and the methods he uses works well for a fighter, but it's also about whether he actually likes the fighter as a person, whether he can get along with them, because it is a business relationship, not just a boxing relationship. And I'm sure he doesn't want a repeat of what happened with George Groves, for example, where they parted ways quite acrimoniously. And if you've seen George Groves talk about Adam Booth since, there's no love lost there. So you can see why Booth might be a bit more picky now in terms of the fighters he works with. Adam Booth has also said himself that he is naturally quite a private person. So that might also be why he doesn't make himself available to the media as much as some other boxing trainers do. He doesn't do that many interviews these days. He definitely isn't a celebrity trainer. Therefore, he might not attract the same amount of talent as one or two other trainers who are much more in the public eye. And the reason I say this is because I've seen some people criticize Booth for not having that much success after David Haye, and they argue that David Haye could have been just as successful, if not more successful than he was, with a number of other trainers, and therefore Adam Booth was somewhat flattered by the David Haye success story. Many of the same people will also point to the likes of Virgil Hunter and criticize him in a similar way and say, well, look, he had Andre Ward, but since then, what's Virgil Hunter done? What fighters has he produced at the top level? And I think these are valid criticisms. I'm not saying I agree necessarily, but they are valid criticisms because the proof is in the pudding at the end of the day. A tree is known by its fruits. You can only judge someone on what they've actually done, including what they've done lately, their longevity. With that being said, I do tend to suspect that Adam Booth is better than a lot of people are giving him credit for right now. And don't get it twisted, I myself was quite critical of Adam Booth, especially back in the early days of David Haye's career, but I do feel as though he's improved since then. I've always rated his understanding of the psychology of fighters very highly, but when it comes to the boxing style that he teaches, in the early days I felt it left a lot to be desired. It seemed to be modeled on the Roy Jones Jr. style, basically, therefore was heavily reliant on elite level athleticism. The problem is most fighters don't have elite level athleticism. Also, Booth fighters like David Haye and George Groves were deficient when it came to inside fighting. And this was another criticism I had of the Booth style. However, with all that being said, when it comes to Anthony Joshua, he already does certain things much better than an Anthony Joshua or a George Groves, such as shortening up his punches and throwing hard, fast combinations on the inside. So that's not something that he would need to rely on Adam Booth to teach him. Anthony Joshua, by my estimation, needs to become more fluid. He needs to be less upright. He needs to introduce more head movement. And these are things which I do think Adam Booth could teach him, because Adam Booth is good with that kind of stuff. The outside movement, the fluidity, the feints, the upper body movement. And as I already mentioned, he's good when it comes to boxing psychology. Now, I'm not saying that Booth would be the perfect trainer for Anthony Joshua, but I do think that he should go over to Adam Booth's gym down there in Surrey and do a little trial with him, the same way he has done with all these American trainers, and just see if there's any simpatico there. I know some people are going to look at Josh Kelly and the way he fell apart against Avanesian, and they're going to say, there's no way that Adam Booth should be teaching Anthony Joshua, because look at the way Adam Booth fighters are falling apart. But the reality is there's only so much a trainer can do for a fighter. You could get the greatest trainer in the world, and I can show you fighters of theirs who have fallen apart in fights. Manny Stewart trained a heavyweight back in the days called Darnell Nicholson, for example. He fell apart a number of times with Manny Stewart in the corner. So a trainer can't turn water into wine. Anyway, that's my view. I think AJ should at least go and have a trial with Adam Booth and see if they can actually work together. If not, there are plenty of other trainers out there in America, in the UK, and I'm sure he'll find one to his liking. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below.